Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will address that aspect straight away. In terms of biofuels, bacteria and other organisms certainly are intended to be used by some, or will be being used. Whether they need to be modified and whether they need patenting is a whole different matter. We're very, very keen on good public science, and not everything should be tied up in commercial entities or operations. And I can think back when we had the DSIR and our Crown Research institution then was seriously public good and very collaborative, and we're working clearly as a country to try and get some senses of that back. But this need, it seems, to have everything put into a commercial context is very unfortunate. The novel and the utility, it should still be part of public good science, and we have to be careful because this suggestion that there's a suppression on innovation by stopping organisms or traits of organisms being patented is misleading. It's the same with ethanol to methanol conversions, and should Lanzatech be the only ones going down that path if it's such an international need, as we sort of acknowledge that we need to look at other forms of energy, that's a very, very sad day. We have institutions, we have science in this country that does not need to be bound into somebody who ultimately would get a patent and then monopolise that. If it's so important, and it is, to work around the area of biofuels, it should not be able to be monopolised or controlled by a single corporate or owner. So I've tabled a supplementary order paper on this crucial area of making sure that companies can't patent life, nor certain elements of life, because it goes right back to the public expectations. And that includes genes and proteins that exist in nature. And we accept that patents are a statutory right, as they're created hundreds of years ago for good purpose. But that was around things, not life. Patents should not be permitted over things that are fundamentally part of the natural world. And no one has invented life or the elements of life. And seeing they haven't, then it follows that no one should be entitled to a patent in New Zealand over life, in fact, anywhere. Some of this comes back to some early decisions. It's about, I was saying early, not those hundreds of years ago. It was really in 1980 when life first got patented. And there was a case, Chakravarti versus Diamond, a decision around a bacterium. And Chakravarti had isolated a particular bacteria, but even then, he was able to get the patent, but he admitted that he simply shuffled genes about, changed bacteria that already existed, he said. He didn't create a new form of life, he merely intervened in the normal processes by which strains of bacteria exchange genetic information. Now, genetic modification, of course, is an extension of that, but it goes much further. That same genetic modification has caused a monopolisation of major parts of the world, the global food supply. So you can think of soy, corn, canola, some real fundamentals there in terms of the international food supply, and they are monopolised, they are controlled because there's patents on some aspects of the technology behind that. We can't afford to, intentionally or not, allow for the patenting of life forms or the elements of life that exist in nature. And colleague over here was right in saying that we believe it will encourage biopiracy of Indigenous resources, and it turns those life forms into just mere commodities that to be used for profit. This is life that pre-existed us as well. To be putting that into some commercial separate ownership is inappropriate. Mr. Smith,
Browning.
Thank you. It also puts up barriers to the free flow of scientific research, and in that material that I did circulate, I pointed out that there was a case, and it's just been won in the Supreme Court in the United States, where there was a breast cancer cell and ovarian cancer cell that had been patented, and that was blocking research in that area. Anything around life, any genetic material, and my colleague again spoke about that, effectively that helix of DNA that is part of the natural world. Sure, we are getting to understand it, and there is some fantastic science, and there are individuals that are discovering new aspects all the time, but that is ours, that is everybody's, and it should not be included. The issue, as I was saying about the breast cancer and the ovarian cancer, those genetic mutations that were identified, there was a huge uproar. There was multiple groups, scientific associations and medical people that pushed against that until that was reversed. We have to be careful here that in New Zealand, that where we've looked at some fantastic new approach and patents around software and computer issues around computer software and programs, and here we could make another clear statement of a similar league by supporting this supplementary order paper. Allowing the passing of this bill without supporting the supplementary order paper will lead to the continued blocking of open research and profit making from our collectively owned genes and resources, and importantly continue the process of stealing those resources and including the intellectual property of Māori. Now, some industries seek out organisms and they draw upon this intellectual property to actually get control and to get control of the food chain. One of them, of course, is internationally known as Monsanto, and it's just created case after case in the courts. It's put farmers out of business, and it's really distorted where farming, where agriculture, where the food supply should naturally lie. It's also had an effect on the availability of the diversity of seed available to everyone. From farmers down to home gardeners. There's a huge reduction in the amount of genetic material available because these monopolies that have got greater and greater control through some patents and just some small angles have also ended up buying up the seed companies and restricted access to others to those same seeds. So what would the amendment do? The amendment would specify that life is not a patentable invention. Currently the bill already excludes some aspects of life, and those exclusions being human beings and their biological processes. That was great. That is a very good exclusion, but it doesn't go far enough. The invention of a method of treatment of human beings by surgery or therapy. That is another very good one. The invention of a method of diagnosis practiced on humans. Another. And then we go into the computer program, which is a fantastic shift. The plant variety, because it's already very deeply, solidly covered under the Plant Varieties Act, it still leaves many life forms, and those elements of this life are still part of it. Just plants aside and humans doesn't go anywhere near enough. So we've got animals, bacteria, viruses, cells and algae. All of those need that extra protection of the supplementary order paper and their traits, because even a piece of DNA or genetic material from those is something that is ours. It is everybody on this planet owns that, but to let someone get that, even if it's just because they're getting to manipulate it slightly, is something quite different than inventing a thing. Mr. Chair, there's a moral level. Life is not I suppose I've done my time, but
I'm going to call. I'm calling.
Mr. Chairman.
I just explained, you've had 2 calls in a row. We don't normally give a 3rd one in a row when someone else is calling, so I'm giving it to Dr. Megan Woods.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.